I want to talk to you a little bit about life, the universe, and everything. I want to talk to you a bit about SEP Fields. Just out of interest, and this is purely for my curiosity, does anyone know what a SEP field is? No. Okay. Pretty resounding no there. Okay, so it is just me that's completely nuts. SEP fields are mentioned in this book um, by a guy called Douglas Adams, who wrote this more famous book he wrote. In fact, it was a radio series called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If I can find a better color of pen. And Douglas Adams, he's a very interesting writer. Or he was. He died back in 2001. And he used to make a lot of interesting observations about life. Things that were really quite amusing when you looked at them. So things like, I love deadlines. I like the whooshing sound they make as they fly by. Or things like, in the beginning, the universe was created. And this has made a lot of people very angry and been widely regarded as a bad move. Or flying is learning how to throw yourself at the ground and miss. Or anyone who is capable of getting themselves made president should on no account be allowed to do the job. So he wasn't talking about the US, he was talking about the president of the galaxy, of course, because this book is a science fiction comedy. But the point is not the book itself. It's not the novel. It's not the story. It's the fact that Douglas Adams had a really interesting way of looking at life. He would rant and rave about the general absurdities of humanity and the weird stuff we get up to, but he would then encompass it within a story. And so you would read these really interesting, unusual, even subversive ideas and not even realize that he's kind of getting at your mind a little bit and making you think differently about things. So he was behind this book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was quite popular. Some of you may even have read it or watched derivations of it at some point. Interesting book. If you like those kinds of quotes, you'll like the book. But the point of all of this that I'm talking about is that in one of his books, he talked about SEP fields. And when I first learned about SEP fields, it had a similar impact upon me as the Stoic quote. Although this came from a comedy book. Now, what's the SEP field? The SEP field is the somebody else's problem field. SEP, somebody else's problem. And in the book, he was talking about this in terms of a story, a comedy story. But this quote from the book kind of opened my eyes to a few things. And as I was thinking about what to talk about in this webinar, the SEP field kept coming to mind. And I eventually figured out why it was coming to mind, and I'm going to explain shortly. So here's the quote. The somebody else's problem field is much simpler and more effective. And he's referring to something that came before. This is because it relies on people's natural disposition not to see anything they don't want to, weren't expecting, or can't explain. A very peculiar statement. It's basically saying, and it's a very interesting observation, and it's pretty obvious when you think about it, that when people don't want to get involved with something, they switch off. They think it's somebody else's problem. They turn a blind eye to it, you could say. But it's even more subtle than that. Remember earlier I said that you must have friends or you must know people for whom the law of attraction, the information about the law of attraction will be life-changing. And yet those people don't even give themselves the choice of thinking that this is a valid idea. they almost have no freedom of thought in thinking the thought that the law of attraction knowledge would help them. They've effectively enveloped the law of attraction in a somebody else's problem field. You might go along to them and say, I've got this great book on law of attraction, you read this, it'll change your life. And they throw an SEP, a SEP field around it, and that book doesn't exist for them. It can be on their bookshelf for years, and they will never look at it, and it will just go, they just won't see it. A bit like what we're saying on the screen here. They have this little process that happens within them where they have this natural disposition to not see anything they don't want to. The SEP field. So when I first read that, and it was a book that came out in 1982, wow, that's interesting. I started to look around and see SEP fields everywhere. So we'll talk about SEP fields a little more in just a few moments. But let me take things a little further. Douglas Adams, he died in 2001. So he didn't write about this next concept. This is me taking his work a little bit further to the concept of the EEPIM pill. So the SEP field is the somebody else's problem field, which you envelop something in it, and that thing won't exist for them, no matter how much they stare at it. So that law of attraction book on their bookshelf just does not exist. They can't even see it. It's there, but there's a SEP field around it. However, the EEPIM pill is my addition, and EEPIM stands for everybody else's problem, including mine. You will notice these days in the world in general, the world that I perceive at least, that people are overdosing on EEPIM pills. Everybody else's problem, including mine. Let's say that you post something online, or you posted something, say, 10 years ago, that was quite funny for the time. Then 10 years later, somebody finds something you posted and says, that's offensive. That should not be allowed. And then a whole crowd of people come out of nowhere. That's offensive. That should not be allowed. Sack that person. Put that person somewhere nasty and make them suffer. When you see that effect happening, all those people, they're all drugged up on EEPIM pills. Everybody else's problem, including mine. No matter what you say, there will be somebody who's taken an EEPIM pill and is now offended by it. EEPIM pills, let me suggest to you, you are overdosing on EEPIM pills if you cannot let go of things. Whereas you should be throwing SEP fields around things. So let me demonstrate the clear difference, hopefully, of a SEP field approach and an EEPIM pill approach. And if you have your own to add to these examples, please feel free to do so. So let's say there's a hole in the road outside where you live, on the public road. So let's make a couple of columns here. Let's say that's a SEP field approach, and this is somebody drugged up on EEPIM pills. So there's a hole in the road outside your house on the public road. If you were having a SEP field approach to this, you would just throw a SEP field around it, and you would say, sorry, that's somebody else's problem. If you had an EEPIM pill, too many, if you had too many that morning, you would be probably writing to your local authorities, complaining about this hole in the road and demanding that stuff be done. One example. Let's say that people are driving too fast where you live. Maybe because they're trying to shoot across this hole in the road, perhaps. The SEP field approach is you look at it, you look at these cars whizzing past and you go, oh well, somebody else's problem. Whereas the drugged up person on EEPIM pills is going to say, well, let's start a campaign against fast drivers and let's really get the ball rolling and report them to the local law enforcement agency. I'm sure you're getting the idea now. So let's say that your country's government has done something that you don't agree with. Throw a SEP field around it, well, it's somebody else's problem. You go back to doing whatever you were doing. EEPIM pills, drugged up EEPIM pill people, well, they will start I don't know, lobbying for political change or something. I don't know, whatever they're overdosed on, they'll be doing all that kind of stuff and making themselves very unhappy in the process. So I hope you can see. If you throw SEP fields around things, you have a nice, happy life. You get drugged up on EEPIM pills, misery. So what I'm kind of advocating here is something shockingly irresponsible. But I'm saying lay off the EEPIM pills. Which, taken out of context, would seem a very cold and callous thing to do, because there are times when you feel like you want to get involved with things. But if you cast your mind back to the diagram we had earlier, where we had the little u and the big U, I hope you can see that the SEP field approach is actually the one that gets results. So you might think you're drugged up on EEPIM pills and you're now attracting from the law of attraction, whilst your higher self is attracting the thing you really want, but you're not. You're just getting in the way. You're just messing things up for yourself. Whereas if instead you just got out of the way, stop overdosing on EEPIM pills, and you just threw a SEP field around that thing, funnily enough, you're more likely to get the thing that you want. You're more likely to get the hole fixed. You're more likely to slow down the drivers. You're more likely to get the government to do what you want. So at some point in the future, no doubt, somebody's going to put this webinar online, chop out all the bits from the early part, and then have me just sounding cold and callous about everything. And those people that do that, well, they're on EEPIM pills. Take it from me.